When missiles fly between the US, Israel, and Iran, the resulting geopolitical shockwaves don't stop at their borders. Recent military strikes and the targeted killing of Ayatollah Khamenei have collapsed regional stability, making state-on-state warfare a direct and immediate threat. Into this dangerous diplomatic vacuum, a surprising volunteer has stepped forward. Pakistan has suddenly pitched its capital, Islamabad, as the venue for high-stakes peace talks. Pakistan's army chief, General Asim Munir, has already initiated direct contact with Iranian officials, and reports indicate he's even reached out to the incoming Trump administration to try and establish a bridge. At the same time, Pakistan's civilian government is working the phones. Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif has held deep discussions with Iran's president to push this back-channel diplomacy forward. This sudden diplomatic surge is in reality a frantic, calculated gamble. Islamabad is essentially fighting for its own survival. To understand why Islamabad is aggressively volunteering for the world's most difficult diplomatic job, we have to look at their domestic reality. Pakistan's economy is bleeding. The country relies heavily on imported energy. The vast majority of Pakistan's oil and natural gas shipments transit right through the Strait of Hormuz, a narrow waterway vulnerable to an expanding conflict involving Iran. Any disruption in that strait translates to severe fuel shortages and massive price spikes. For an economy already on life support, sustained supply chain shocks mean total macroeconomic ruin. Then there's the Beijing factor. Pakistan hosts the multi-billion-dollar China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, or CPEC. With Chinese investments directly threatened by regional instability, Islamabad is under immense pressure to protect those assets. If Pakistan actually manages to broker a peace deal, they secure a critical secondary reward, regaining favor and standing in Washington, D.C. This push for mediation functions as a mandatory rescue mission to prevent Pakistan's own collapse. But jumping into the middle of this fire brings existential risks for Pakistan, starting right inside its own borders. This chart shows Pakistan's religious demographics. Out of a massive population of 250 million people, the country is predominantly Sunni Muslim, but roughly 20% of the population is Shia. That 20% represents over 50 million people. Following the death of Ayatollah Khamenei, this enormous minority group is reacting with palpable anger, feeling deeply vulnerable and betrayed by the state's historical alliances. That tension has already spilled into the streets. In cities like Karachi, massive crowds have gathered outside U.S. diplomatic buildings, holding signs and voicing their dissent against the regime's positioning. Externally, there is a geopolitical trap. Pakistan shares a mutual defense pact with Saudi Arabia. If Pakistan becomes actively involved and faces retaliation, it risks triggering that treaty, potentially dragging Riyadh and eventually even India into a much wider war. By attempting to extinguish the fire between Washington and Tehran, Islamabad risks igniting a sectarian civil war at home, all while activating a dangerous web of regional defense treaties. So, with so much on the line, does the international community actually view Pakistan as an impartial arbiter? The short answer is an emphatic no. Over the last 50 years, Pakistani regimes built a reputation for dual-track diplomacy, playing both sides of global conflicts to their advantage. Trust was shattered most visibly during the War on Terror. While Pakistan received U.S. aid as a strategic ally, the world eventually found Osama bin Laden living in a high-walled compound in Abbottabad. Because of this history, even Iran remains highly suspicious of Pakistan's deep-seated ties to Washington and Saudi Arabia. This is despite the reality that Pakistan's embassy actually issues Iranian visas in Washington, D.C. When the war escalated, the real back-channel diplomacy wasn't happening in Islamabad. It was being presided over by Oman, Egypt, and Turkey, nations that have spent decades acting as credible regional mediators. A country with half a century of acting as a duplicitous middleman cannot simply issue a press release and rebrand itself as a trustworthy peacemaker. Islamabad finds itself in an almost impossible predicament. The state is boxed in by its volatile geography, fractured demographics, and a compromised diplomatic history. As it stands right now, Pakistan is too fragile economically and too untrusted historically to successfully broker a legitimate peace deal between these specific powers. The ambition of pitching Islamabad as the ultimate diplomatic venue stands in contrast to a state struggling to keep its own foundation from collapsing under the weight of external shocks. Ultimately, Islamabad is gambling on high-stakes mediation to save Pakistan from the catastrophic fallout of a regional war.